How's it going, everybody? Positive Key here, bringing you guys another patch notes video for Runescape's Road to Restoration. I think it's been coming along great. If you do too, leave it in the comments, let me know. And if you're not already subbed up, please drop a sub, a like. Any feedback is appreciated. Stay positive out there, and let's get right into the video. Alright, so the update is all about bringing all four combat styles into alignment. This means consistent scaling, clearer rules, and a more readable progression across the board. Regardless of which style you choose, the underlying structure should feel cohesive and intuitive. The core philosophy is simple: raise the floor without lowering the ceiling. Combat should be more welcoming, understandable, and satisfying from the outset, while still preserving the space for optimization, skill expression, and high level strategy. That's the ambition. Below, we'll break down how they're making that happen. Combat skills are all going to be increased to 120 to bring the core combat styles in line with necromancy, which already progresses to 120. We've increased the maximum level for attack, strength, ranged, and magic to 120 as well. As part of this rebalance, and as further explained below, berserker auras have been disabled. Previously, these auras provided a significant combat bonus and effectively bridged the power gap between the 99 cap styles and necromancy's 120 level cap. Now that all combat styles extend to 120, that temporary solution is no longer required, as power parity is achieved through internal skill progression rather than external buffs. Does this mean that I need to be level 120 to have the same power as I currently do at 99? Thankfully, no, that isn't required. We have rebalanced the damage per level curve to boost the value of the earlier levels. Check just below for more information. Additionally, to support this transition, we're introducing a grace period that runs until 20th of November, so that there's also no need to rush to 120 immediately to retain your completionist cape. So make sure you're doing that if you're trying to keep it. Okay. Damage level scaling. One of our key goals with this update is to make combat progression feel smoother and more rewarding throughout the mid-game. We want players to feel comfortable engaging with bosses and higher level content before reaching level 120, rather than feeling pressure to max out a first skill. This change also helps compensate for the removal of combat boosting auras, ensuring that reaching level 120 still represents a meaningful and competitive power point. To support this, we've adjusted how damage per level is calculated. On live, damage per level scales linearly. The relevant combat stat, for example, your range level, will, when used as a ranged weapon, is multiplied by 2.5. This creates a straight line progression where each level adds the same amount of damage. We've replaced this with a logarithmic scaling curve. This new approach grants relatively more power through the mid-game, helping combat feel less grindy as you level, while tapering off toward the top end. For those interested in the technical details, the new formula is this right here. I'm not reading that one, sorry. New 120 skill cape perks. Okay, we've added new perks to each of the 120's combat skill capes to reward mastery of a combat style. These perks are intended to provide decent utility when you finish leveling the skill. Our aim is to strike a careful balance. These perks should provide reasonable value for the commitment required to reach level 120. However, they must not introduce so much power that 120 becomes a prerequisite for engaging with bosses or other PvM encounters. The goal is optimization and quality of life, not adding a feeling of gating access to content. When you're using a particular combat style, the 120 cape should feel like a natural and satisfying choice, but not a mandatory one. The 120 attack cape grants a 2% increase hit chance for melee attacks. This offers a small but consistent boost to reliably, particularly in encounters with higher defense, without broadly increasing overall damage. Excuse me. 120 strength cape. Dismember, slaughter, and massacre heal an additional 2% life points. This strengthens the sustain element of core melee bleed abilities and offsets some of the downside of having to be in melee/range. 120 magic cape. Hex spells last twice as long. This improves the uptime and reduces the need for frequent reapplication in longer encounters, smoothing out gameplay flow. This does not apply to Entangle or Teleblock in PvP. Very crucial. 120 Rangescape grants a 10% chance to not consume ammunition. Pretty cool. This provides a constant economic and quality of life benefit without directly increasing damage output. Okay. Ability books, tutorials, and legacy. We've reorganized the ability books to make them clearer and easier to navigate. Abilities are now grouped by type, including basic, enhanced, ultimate, and utility categories, helping players quickly understand their role within a rotation. For melee specifically, the attack and strength ability books have been merged into a single unified melee book. This simplifies navigation, reduces unnecessary separation between the two skills, and makes it easier to find and manage your abilities in one place. Alongside these structural improvements, each combat style now includes contextual pop up tutorials when you unlock the new ability that explain what the ability does and when you might want to use it. The intention is to make the progression feel clearer and more guided, particularly for the newer players learning a style for the first time. Finally, the Legacy Combat mode has been renamed to Classic to align with our recent UI terminology updates. Classic mode now also uses the modern ability animations, bringing it visually in line with the rest of the combat system while preserving its distinct gameplay style. New basic attacks. Despite the name, auto attacks have not truly sat at the center of combat for a long time. For most players, they were either barely noticeable or too intuitive to deliberately engage with. Over time, the system became increasingly archaic and it relied on hidden timers, unclear interactions, and behavior that was never meaningfully explained in the game. For the majority of players, auto attacks simply happen in the background. For a small number of high level players, they became optimization tools tied to obscure knowledge. In neither case were they serving as a clear, accessible foundation for combat. With Necromancy, we introduced a visible, structured, basic ability that operates within the global cooldown system. This created a clearer baseline, more readable timing, and a smoother combat loop. The reception to that simplicity made it clear that the other styles needed the same modern foundation. What has changed? The basic attacks have been added to magic, ranged melee, and fully replacing auto attacks. These new basic attacks operate on the standard global cooldown system, provide consistent timing across all combat styles, create a clear and more understandable combat rhythm. Magic specific changes. Magic basic attacks use the data and effects of your currently selected spell. Example, Ice Barrage basic attacks visually appear as Ice Barrage and apply its effects, including area damage and stun. Hex spells now operate on the standard global cooldown system instead of the legacy auto attack timer. Offhand spell casting has been removed. The additional updates, weapon attack speeds are now hidden, with all basic attacks operating on a fixed 1.8-second global timer cooldown, and individual weapon speeds are no longer functionally relevant under the new system. During development, we experimented with allowing the GCD to speed up and slow down based on weapons' traditional attack speed. In practice, this proved clunky and unintuitive. It created inconsistent timing between weapon swaps, made rotations harder to read, and undermined the clarity that we're aiming for with a unified combat framework. A fixed 1.8-second GCD provides consistent pacing across all styles and removes hidden complexity, ensuring combat feels stable, predictable, and easier to understand. Okay, adrenaline usage and generation. All basic abilities now generate 9% adrenaline, increased from 8% on live. This brings the original combat styles into parity with necromancy, aligning adrenaline regeneration across the entire combat system, no matter which style you're using. The foundational resource flow now follows the same structure and expectations. The choice of 9% is deliberate with a 1.8-second global GCD. This cleanly translates to 3% adrenaline per 0.6-second cycle. This gives us flexibility for future pacing adjustments. If the GCD were ever adjusted to speed up or slow down in a structured way, adrenaline gain would scale cleanly and predictably without introducing awkward decimals or hidden inconsistencies. Threshold abilities reworked. As as part of this update, all threshold abilities in the three core styles have been reworked. They no longer require 50% adrenaline to activate. They have been renamed enhanced abilities. Each enhanced ability now has an updated adrenaline cost. This allows for more flexible pacing within rotations and gives us finer control over balance at different stages of progression. Full details for each style can be found in the ability uh, lists below. Lesser abilities removed. With the introduction of a dedicated basic attack acting as the default filler ability, lesser abilities no longer serve a meaningful purpose within the combat system. Previously, lesser abilities were intended to fill gaps between major unlocks and keep early progression feeling active. In practice, however, they were often just redundant or confusing. Many lesser abilities were either numerically weak or offered no compelling reason to use them. Now that every style has a consistent basic attack to anchor rotations, we no longer need placeholder abilities to maintain combat flow. This allows us to reduce overall ability clutter and ensure that each unlock feels deliberate and meaningful, basically cutting down the abilities so it's not so much. Okay. Melee style core changes and identity. Melee is the style that rewards getting close by hitting hard. Much of its depth comes from weapon choice, opening up different abilities, or even modifying abilities depending on the equipped weapon. That flexibility gives melee a reactive feel. Historically, however, melee has struggled with sticking to targets and survivability, especially when managing boss mechanics or mitigating the increased damage taken during Berserk. We have rebalanced the kit to address this. Power has been shifted away from extreme cooldown spikes and redistributed across the base toolkit. The goal is for melee to feel consistently strong, not just during short burst windows. It should reward getting up close and personal rather than relying on a single activation to define its output. Bloodlust. We are also introducing a new melee specific resource mechanic called Bloodlust. Using basic abilities builds stacks of bloodlust. These stacks are then consumed by enhanced abilities to empower them with additional effects such as increased damage or extra hits. This creates a more deliberate gameplay loop. Basics fuel your momentum, and enhanced abilities convert that momentum into payoff. The intention is to create depth while making the rotation clearer and more structured. Structural changes. All melee abilities have been combined into a single ability book. This simplifies the interface and removes the need to manage separate attacks and strength tabs. We have also updated ability requirements so that all melee abilities now unlock with attack instead of strength. Strength remains important, unlocking specific weapons such as Exekill and contributing to overall damage through level based benefits, including increased damage per level and critical strike damage bonus at certain stress thresholds. Unlock order rework. With the new combat foundation and bloodlust system in place, melee unlock progression has been fully restructured. Part of the goal is to ease players into the style, introducing mechanics in a clear and deliberate order, so they naturally learn how the combat loop functions as they play at ah, loop functions as they level. Sorry about that. Abilities are now spaced and sequenced to reinforce core concepts, build understanding over time, and ensure that each unlock feels purposeful rather than overwhelming. Basic attack level 1. Assault is 3 with enhanced adaptive strike is 7. Basic attack overpower 15 is an ultimate. Rend 18 basic. Fury 21 basic. Backhand 31 basic. Hurricane 37 basic. Flurry 45 basic. Hurricane 37 enhanced, sorry. Dismember 50 enhanced. Punish 60 basic. Barge 65 basic. Pulverize 71 ultimate. Berserk 76 ultimate. Meteor Strike 90 ultimate. Chaos Roar 92 basic. Still need the codex. All right. All right. New basic attacks. Melee's new basic attack is intentionally stronger than the equivalent abilities in their other styles. This reflects the inherent trade-offs of playing melee, including the need to remain in close range and the requirement to train both attack and strength. Adaptive Strike combines the strongest elements of Decimate and Cleave into a single flexible ability, freeing up valuable action bar space. When dual wielding, it gains Decimate, multi hit functionality, and slightly increased damage. When using a two-handed weapon, it gains Cleave, AoE, component, generates more adrenaline than a standard basic ability. Adaptive Strike is designed to act as a rotational cornerstone, adapting to your weapon choice while accelerating your adrenaline gain. New Rend. Rend is now uh, second new melee basic ability. It provides a strong single target hit and a fast way to prepare for Bloodlust empowered enhanced abilities. Deals higher direct damage, builds Bloodlust more quickly. Fury remains a core and reliable basic ability, particularly useful for setting up high impact attacks such as Hurricane and Overpower. Its primary case remains similar to the live game, with the addition of generating Bloodlust to feed into the new resource loop. Punish, like other abilities, Punish has been scaled up to make the for the Berserk reduction. It remains its strongest basic ability in against enemies below 50% health. It is worth noting the most basic like Punish and Fury that have a bonus effect have had their damage values brought in line with the basic attack, so there's less pressure to use them unless you want to utilize their effects. So basically, unless you're just trying to get the 2.5 or the buffs off them, is what they're saying. Barge remains largely unchanged, continuing to provide melee with a fast and reliable way to engage targets. Greater barrage benefits decently from the wider changes to flurry and assault, as it now has access to stronger channeled abilities to convert into bleeds. Backhand, as part of simplifying the style and reducing ability bloat, forceful backhand, kick, and stomp have been removed. I think that's a good one. Backhand has been strengthened to preserve access to stun utility when needed. Damage has been increased from 65% to 75 to 95 to 105. Gains a second charge at level 54. The knockback effect from kick is now part of the scare tactics unlock and can be toggled on or off within backhand. The consolidation keeps the stun tool set intact while reducing redundancy. Chaos Roar. Along Berserk, Chaos Roar previously contributed to extremely high burst stacking. We are reducing its peak output so that power can be redistributed across the wider kit. It remains a powerful burst tool, but it no longer double dips with other systemic changes. Damage bonus reduced from 100 to 75%. This supports the broader goal of smoothing melee's power curve and reducing reliance on extreme cooldown windows. Melee enhanced abilities. Assault is now a core part of your damage rotation and the first spender ability you unlock. Use it to cash in your adrenaline and lay into your enemies. And when you have built up enough bloodlust stacks, it hits even harder. Now deals 160% average damage per hit, up to a total of 640 percentage total. Now deals 200% average damage per hit while bloodlusted up to 800%. Adrenaline cost reduced to 25%, cooldown reduced to 6 seconds. Hurricane, leaning into its AoE identity, Hurricane can now reduce its cooldown from each enemy hit, making it an even more potent AoE damage tool. When paired with Adaptive Strike's cleave potential, it really comes into its own, especially during Slayer. Now deals 320% average damage to the primary target, deals 405% average damage to the primary target while bloodlusted. New cooldown is reduced by 3 seconds per enemy hit, and now costs 25% adrenaline. Flurry fell over slightly before its greater upgrade, whereby it hit rapidly but not for a lot of damage. We've increased its baseline damage and given it a bloodlusted effect, allowing it to feel more like a multi-hit monster at the end of the fight. Similarly, reducing cooldown of Berserk often let your cooldowns run out of sync. So we flipped this to extend the duration of Berserk instead. Now deals 70% damage per hit, up to 560% total. Deals up to 1.65 times the damage while bloodlusted, scaling with the target's missing life points. Costs 25 adrenaline now. Additionally, stuns the primary target. Graded Flurry extends the duration of Berserk per hit instead of reducing its cooldown. Dismember. Bleeds have always been a sub build within Melee, mainly supported by specific pieces of equipment. To better support that playstyle, we've reworked Dismember into a 3-stage ability. This first cast costs no adrenaline and applies a bleed to your target. You can then follow up with a second cast that applies a stronger bleed for 25% adrenaline, and finally a third cast that adds another powerful bleed for an additional 25%. All three bleeds can be active at the same time, and as a bonus, they heal you for 10% of the damage they deal, giving melee much needed sustain built directly into its core kit. Now heals for 10% of damage dealt, can be recast at higher levels to reapply bleed effects. Slaughter unlocks as a recast at level 60 attack. Massacre unlocks as a recast at level 75 attack. Overpower now delivers even more value with a reduced adrenaline cost and increased damage to make it hit harder for less. Now costs 60 adrenaline and now deals 575% average damage. Pulverize and Berserk. Pulverize, so reliable, remains largely the same, but now hits harder and costs less adrenaline, bringing its cost in line with Overpower while preserving its utility and reducing the damage your opponent deals. Now costs 60% adrenaline, now deals 320% average damage. Berserk. Much of the melee's power was tied up in Berserk and Chaos Roar, so to make the base kit stronger, we've reduced Berserker's damage bonus. We've also lowered its self-damage multiplier and adjusted it to work with the new Bloodlust mechanic, letting you build more stacks and reducing Overpower's cooldowns to open up new ways to maximize its use. Damage bonus reduced from 100% to 75%. Damage taken reduced from 50% to 25%. Increased bloodlust generation and maximum cap now reduces Overpower's cooldown to 9 seconds. Meteor Strike. We've shifted Meteor Strike away from relying on crits for adrenaline. It now boosts the adrenaline you gain from using abilities and provides a steady flow of adrenaline while you stay in melee combat. It now costs 60% adrenaline on critical adrenaline gain removed. Basic abilities now generate 1.5 times adrenaline while active. Now passively generates adrenaline for the duration of the buff. Special attack adjustments. As mentioned earlier, part of the melee's identity comes from its wealth of interesting special attacks. Alongside the other changes to melee, the following special attacks have had their average damage increased. Dark Shard of Lang, primary hit 110% to 125, AoE hit 165% to 190%. X to kill is 250% to 280 on the primary hit. Secondary hits are 225 to 255. Tomb Begins Light is 260 to 295%. Varanus is Mercury. Primary hit 75% to 90%. Secondary hits 150% to 165%. Stadius's hammer, Warhammer is 150 to 170%. The dragon weapons increased as well. Dragon Claws 360% to 400, and the Dragon Halberd is 125% to 140%. Dragon Longsword is 270% to 295%. Dragon Mace 230% to 260%. Dragon Scimitar is 230% to 260%. The God Swords got increased as well. Armadillo is 400 to 440. Bandos is 220 to 245. Ceradoma Godsword is 175 to 200. Zamorak Godsword 175 to 200. Ceradoman Sword is 175 to 200 increase. Other weapon adjustments. Rune Claws 120% to 140%. Granite Maul 110% to 125%. Keen Blade 140% to 160%. Bone Dagger 140% to 160%. Karasi Sword 220% to 250%. Ancient Mace 120% to 135%. Abyssal Whip 60% to 80%. Dark Light is 60% to 80%. Barrel Chest Anchor 120% to 135%. Brackish Blade 120%, 135%. Vesta's Longsword 250% to 275%. Vesta Spear 100% to 115%. Ranged. Ranged at its core excels at multi-hitting, layering rapid strikes, and smaller hits to build toward powerful payoffs, rather than relying on a single heavy impact. Ranged rewards comboing powerful attacks and utilizing different ammunition. The changes in this update are not about redefining the style, but about reinforcing what already works and building it directly into the kit. Our goal is to sharpen its identity, improve consistency, make key abilities feel smoother, and have clear reasons to use. Structural changes. Core range scripts have been fully rewritten to modernize the style and bring it in line with the unified combat framework. Ranged abilities now use fixed impact timings. Previously, weapon overrides and attack speed differences could subtly alter when damage landed. They're talking about the blowpipe. This created inconsistencies between setups and made the ability timing less predictable. Damage now lands at consistent, defined timings regardless of weapon overrides, improving readability and making rotations more reliable. AoE effects have also been standardized. Ranged AoE attacks now calculate their impact based on an NPC's size and center coordinate rather than the southwest tile. This improves predictability against large enemies and removes edge cases where positioning produced unintuitive results. AoE behavior should now feel fairer and more consistent across encounters. Together, these changes ensure that when you press an ability, its timing and area behave exactly as expected. Ammunition rules and resource clarity. All ranged abilities now require ammunition to cast. Previously, players were able to train ranged without consuming any ammunition, which created an inconsistency in the game world and undermined the relevance of the fletching skill. To address this, we are standardizing how much ammunition is consumed so that it feels logical and fair across the game. When ammunition is used, ammunition is dropped on the ground after being fired. Completing animal magnetism will allow the majority of the ammunition to be returned automatically without being picked up. By default, 20% of the ammunition would be dropped or returned instead of destroyed. For comparison, Elder God arrows previously had a 33% consumption rate. Under the new system, overall ammunition loss is significantly reduced. Ammunition is consumed per shots fired, not per hit. For example, Ricochet fires a single shot that can hit up to 7 targets. Under the new rules, this only provides a single chance to consume ammunition rather than one per hit. This makes multi-hit abilities more predictable and less punishing from an ammo perspective. By default, ammunition drops underneath your target. If that tile is blocked, it instead drops beneath your character. This creates a more predictable ammunition economy. Most ammunition will be recoverable while still maintaining a controlled resource sink to prevent infinite sustain. Some ammunition types intentionally override these rules. For example, Chinchampas always explode on impact and are destroyed, preserving their thematic identity and mechanical trade-off. Unlock order rework. Basic attack is 1, snapshot 2, change it to enhance. Snipe is 7, they change it to enhance. Piercing shot 13 basic, dead shot 21 ultimate, binding shot 31 basic, bombardment 36 enhanced, gale shot 58 basic, rapid fire 62 enhanced, ricochet 67 basic, corruption shot 70 enhanced, shadow tendrils 75 enhanced, death swiftness 76 ultimate, imbue shadows 90 enhanced. Okay, on to Gale Shot. Gale Shot is the first of the ranged new abilities. Think of it as a spiritual successor to Needle Strike, but instead of increasing the damage of your next attack by 7%, It instead increases the damage of all your hits for a duration of flat amount, meaning it favors you preparing your target with multiple hits rather than singular hitting abilities. Piercing shot remains ranged bread and butter ability, dealing reasonable damage but building on the multi-hitting concepts. This remains unchanged. However, we're adding some extra spice to it by allowing it to reduce the cooldown of snipe each time it hits. The intention here is to give early game ranged a powerful ability that can be promoted through use of piercing shot, while also offering us some avenues to explore for sub themes later on down the line. Reduces the cooldown of snipe by 2.4 per seconds per hit. Binding shot. The knockback effect from route is now unlockable via scare tactics and can be toggled on and off within the binding shot. Now gains a second charge at level 54. Ricochet. A lot of range powers was locked behind greater ricochet due to it turning ricochet from a single shot into a 7 hit shot. We're giving standard ricochet the multi-hit effect, but allowing greater to remain a big upgrade by gaining the old corroming effect. Now includes the previous greater ricochet effect by default. Initial hit now deals 80% average damage. Additional hits now deal 17.5% average damage each. Greater ricochet now increases the number of hits instead of coming from corroming. Hits for additional times beyond ricochet, dealing 5% average damage per hit. Ranged enhance abilities. New Imbue Shadows. Imbue Shadows is the second of our new abilities and another bigger payoff for landing multiple hits on your target. The ability essentially replaces Incendiary Shot, granting a self buff that grants 5% adrenaline for every time a shot of yours hits a target, meaning it grants a huge influx of adrenaline when combined with abilities like Rapid Fire, Ricochet, and Dead Shot. The intention of with the two new abilities is to add meaningful payoffs to range that cements the multi-hit style without relying on the outside buffs or items. Snapshot is ranged core spender, dealing good damage and hitting twice. With the removal of threshold abilities, we've rebalanced its costs and have cemented the identity as the core spender through a few key changes. Deals 290% average damage, has no cooldown, and costs 25 adrenaline. Snipe has been shaken up. It previously was a fine basic ability, but didn't really deliver on the sniper theme due to its underwhelming damage. We made it an enhanced ability instead of a basic ability, letting us better deliver on the sniper theme, while also granting early game ranged a powerful ability that wants to be used as soon as it's off cooldown. No longer a basic ability, deals 330% average damage, has a 60-second cooldown, channel time reduced from 2.4 seconds to 1.8. Bombardment has pretty much always been suggestively bad. We're making it a better tool for AoE situations by giving it a full rebalance. It now deals 240% average damage to each enemy. AoE range increased from 1 tile to 2. Now costs 25% adrenaline. No longer has a cooldown. Rapid Fire has had some core changes, gaining the old fleeting boots effect, allowing movement, and offering some clear structure by synergizing directly with Gale Shot. Now deals 80% average damage per hit. Can now move while channeling. Extends the duration of Searing Winds by 0.6 per hit. Now costs 25% adrenaline. Shadow Tendrils has been rebalanced, making an important cooldown for maximizing damage and adrenaline gain through Imbue Shadows. No longer costs adrenaline, now deals 220% average damage, extends the duration of Imbued by 3.6 seconds. Corruption Shot. Ranged had a few tools to tag monsters that weren't grouped up. By changing Corruption Shot, we give Ranged a valuable tag tool, and it let us separate Corruption Shot from Corruption Blast a little. Now deals 300% average damage to enemy, now immediately hits up to 5 enemy additional targets within 5 tiles, no longer spreads on each hit, and now costs 20% adrenaline. Deadshot. Deadshot for an ultimate was lacking a lot of power. The damage over time effect didn't synergize with ranged core kit, and the damage generally wasn't enough.
We're flipping it to be a multi-hit ultimate and synergize with ranged core kit. It now deals 115% average damage per hit. Igneous Calcil, 65% average damage per hit. No longer applies damage over time. Instead, hits the target multiple times, and costs 60% adrenaline. All right, now on to magic. Magic as a style has had less changes than others. Its core play pattern was enjoyable and decently well structured, with critical strikes becoming the core builds for the style, and a damage over time burn build emerging. Throughout the beta, our focus has been on reinforcing these identities and adding some structure to the style. Several abilities have been adjusted to better support these two play styles. As with other combat styles, Magic has also received structural updates to bring it in line with the unified combat framework. Core Magic scripts have been fully rewritten to modernize the style and remove legacy inconsistencies. Magic abilities now use fixed impact timings. Previously, weapon type could subtly influence when damage was applied. However, more commonly, distance from your target would affect which cycle damage was applied on. This created edge cases and rotations and made certain setups feel inconsistent. Damage now lands at defined, predictable timings, regardless of weapon or distance. Like the other styles, AoE abilities have also been standardized. Magic AoE now calculates impact based on NPC size, center, coordinate, just like all the other ones now. Rather than Southwest tile, this improves consistency against groups of larger enemies. All abilities now require runes to cast. This reinforces Magic's identity as a resource-driven style and restores clarity to its relationship with rune crafting and the in-game economy. Runes are consumed 20% of the time per ability cast. This establishes a predictable and consistent cost structure while keeping overall rune usage manageable. Under the previous system, rune consumption could feel inconsistent or bypassed entirely in certain setups. Modernizing this behavior ensures magic always meaningfully interacts with its core resource. Rune sinks are predictable. Magic is consistent with how many runes are consumed as you level through the style. One time activation spells such as Hex's vulnerability, Smoke Cloud, and utility spells remained unchanged. This mirrors the ammunition changes made to range, bringing parity between the two styles. Magic Unlocks progression has been restructured to better reflect its core identity. Basically, all the same stuff is said in the last two about them. The basic attack is level 1, it's still a basic attack. Wild Magic is 3, it's an enhanced. Sonic Wave is 6, it's basic. Omni Power 12, ultimate. Dragon Breath 19 is basic. Runic Charge 26 utility. Impact 31 basic. Combust 38 basic. Chain 51 basic. Asphyxiate 59 enhanced. Concentrated Blast 66 basic. Corruption Blast 70 enhanced. Smoke Tendrils 75 enhanced. Sunshine 76 ultimate. Magma Tempest 85 enhanced. Tsunami 90 ultimate. Sonic Wave sees some big changes. Instead of granting accuracy damage, it now reduces the adrenaline cost of your next ability. The intent behind Sonic is to try to level magic out a little, getting some power out of the standard Sunshine rotation and into the rest of the rotation, rewarding frequent use of spenders by making them consistently cheaper to cast. It reduces the adrenaline cost of your next ability by 10%. Greater Sonic Wave is 20%.
Dragon Breath and Combust are thematically nice together, but payoff wasn't present until Carapax wrist wraps were adding synergy. That in the early and mid game gives players a clear reward for properly sequencing their abilities. Now deals 25 increased damage to combusted enemies. Combust, the movement requirement in Combust create a lot of encounter dependent value. We've shifted that power into reliable baseline damage. Now deals 30% average damage per hit over 10 hits, up to 300 total percentage. No longer deals increased damage when the target moves. Impact, the knockback effect from horror is now unlockable via scare tactics and can be toggled on and off within impact. Now gains a second charge at level 54. Chain baseline felt incomplete without its greater upgrade. We're baking in its core functionality so it feels good to use at all levels while keeping greater as a meaningful AoE amplification tool. Now includes the previous greater chain effect by default. Initial hit now deals 80% average damage, greater 90%. Now shares 30% of your next ability's damage with secondary targets. Greater is 50%. Concentrated Blast. The gap between Concentrated Blast and the greater version was massive. We're pushing some of the power into the baseline version and the critical strike bonus. Now channels over 1.8 seconds, matches greater Concentrated Blast. Now deals 35% average damage per hit, 105% total. Greater 45% per hit, now grants 5% stacking critical strike chance per hit. The greater one is 7% per hit. Critical strike chance now applies to the next ability, not the next hit. Example, both hits of wild magic benefit. Magic enhanced abilities. Wild magic is magic's signature spender. Lowering the cooldown allows it to remove some reliance on special attacks and lets it interact more frequently with Sonic Wave. Now, Wild Magic now deals 140% average damage per hit, up to 280% total. Cooldown reduced to 5.4 seconds, now costs 25% adrenaline. Asphyxiate now costs 25% adrenaline. Smoke tendrils, they're lowering the cost of smoke tendrils, so players without all the crit boosting gear have a reliable way to get payoffs with Tsunami. Now deals 60% average damage on the first hit, increasing by 12.5% average damage per hit, up to 315% total. Now costs 0 adrenaline. Magma Tempest. We're balancing Magma Tempest and Corruption Blast out of the basic ability slot so it's clear that they excel in AoE situations and reduce their impact in core rotations. Now deals 40% average damage per hit, up to 320% total. Now costs 20% adrenaline. Corruption Blast. Now deals 100% average damage on initial hit, 300% total. Now costs 20% adrenaline. Magic ultimate abilities, Omni Power. Like the other damaging abilities, ultimate or like the other damaging ultimates is intended to be a big payoff for the building up to it. However, it's always fallen short without the Zook Cape upgrades. We're moving the reduced costs into the core of the ability so it feels better to use before reaching the end game. Now deals 460% average damage. Igneous Calme, 135 average damage per hit. 4 hits up to 400 or 540% total and costs 60% adrenaline. Magic utility abilities. Runic Charge. Runic Charge is Magic's new ability. It sits in the utility part of the ability book. The ability is quite unique in that it neither applies the global GCD nor does it use or gain adrenaline, meaning it can be cast instantly to gain its effects. When cast, it improves your Sonic Wave, Concentrated Blast, or Dragon Breath ability. Sonic Wave further reduces the adrenaline cost of your next ability. Blast further increases your critical strike chance. Dragon Breath vastly increases the damage it deals. Additional changes, removed abilities. As part of the changes, we are removing a number of abilities from the above styles. From a game design perspective, maintaining a healthy combat system is not just about adding new tools. It is also about knowing when to remove or consolidate existing ones, which I agree. They've been doing a great job. I really shout out Jagex for this. Like honestly, they're really trying to improve the new RuneScape, and I appreciate it as a RuneScape player because, in my opinion, it's been a long time since they put this much effort into fixing the game. So hopefully they just continue to do that. But anyways, over time, each of the styles accumulated several abilities that overlapped in function, were heavily outclassed, and or no longer fit cleanly within the identities we want the style to emphasize. When too many abilities compete for the same space, several problems emerge. New players struggle to understand which abilities are core and which are situational. Some abilities become noob traps that look viable but are mathematically inferior. Action bars become cluttered with options that rarely justify their slot.
By removing underused, redundant, or confusing abilities, we create space for the remaining toolkit to feel sharper and more intentional. Each ability that remains should serve a clear role within the styles. This improves readability, makes progression easier to teach, and ensures that new unlocks feel meaningful. The following abilities have been removed from the melee class: Balance Strike, Blood Tendrils, Cleave, Decimate, Destroy, Forceful Backhand, Kick, Sever, Slice, Stomp, Smash. The removals to range are Tight Bindings, Dazing Shot, Demoralized, Rout, Needle Strike, Fragmentation Shot, Salt to Wound, Unload, Incendiary Shot. Following have been removed from Magic: Detonate, Rack, Metamorphosis, Deep Impact, Shock, and Horror. Auras. As outlined in our Auras Overhaul blog, a number of combat focused auras are now being disabled. With the increase of level 20 for magic, ranged, attack, and strength, alongside broader systemic improvements to those styles, much of the power previously granted through auras has now been integrated directly into the core combat kits, rather than relying on external buffs to reach competitive performance. That strength now exists within the baseline progression of each style. Auras that do not directly impact player power, such as vampirism, will remain available until they are addressed in the wider aura overhaul update. The following auras have been disabled and can no longer be purchased: Knockout, Brawler, Runic Accuracy, Sharpshooter, Ancestor Spirits, Berserker, Maniacal, Reckless, Dark Magic, Regeneration, Aegis, Majorat, Inspiration, Equilibrium, Invigorate. Adjustments to Necromancy. While magic, ranged, attack, and strength have received level cap increases and systemic improvements, we recognize that removing combat auras could leave Necromancy comparatively behind at the highest level of play. To mitigate this and preserve Necromancy's endgame power, we are making the following adjustments. Death Skull's, Death Skull's cooldown reduced from 12 seconds to 10 seconds, while inside Living Death, Impatient perk now also works with basic attacks. Fury of the Small Relic now also works with the basic attacks. These changes are intended to make triple Death Skulls rotations inside Living Death more consistently achievable, offsetting the previous reliance on the Invigorate aura. Slightly increase the overall adrenaline generation available to Necromancy, improve consistency by ensuring basic attacks are treated as basic abilities appropriately, and properly interact with adrenaline supporting effects. The goal is to maintain parity across all four combat styles while moving away from the aura dependent gameplay. W, all of them. Okay, food changes. Let's hear about this one. We have made two important changes to how food functions in combat. First, food no longer scales its healing based on constitution level. Finally. Never should have been like that in the first place. And now restores its full listed value regardless of your level, making its effect consistent and simple to understand. Second, eating food now drains 3% adrenaline, reduced from 10%. The previous 10% drain disproportionately punished early and mid game players who rely on food more often. End game players with access to sustain tools such as Soul Split were far less affected. Lowering the drain, while not removing it entirely, preserves the intended trade off between healing and damage output without trapping players in situations where repeated eating prevents them from building enough adrenaline to use meaningful abilities. Perk adjustments. Some changes to abilities or their removal resulted in a number of perks being redundant or needing changes to have more purpose. With that in mind, we're making the following changes. Energizing now grants plus 50 accuracy, plus 25 per rank. Lunging now increases the damage of dismember and combust by 10%, plus 3% per rank. Coroming now increases the copied damage of Greater Chain by 5% plus 5% per rank. Now grants Ricochet plus 2.5% ability damage as bonus on hit damage per rank. Ultimatums now affects all ultimate abilities, grants 3% plus 1% damage per rank. Equipment adjustments. Uh, like perks, some items require changes due to the ability adjustments. With that in mind, we're making the following changes. X to kill. Some of the power from this has been redistributed into the core abilities, or the affected abilities have been removed. As a result, the execute will no longer bolster specific abilities. Pulverize, adrenaline reduction effect has been made baseline. Smash and Quake abilities have been removed. Blast Diffusion Boots. Wild Magic now grants plus 8% basic magic ability for 6 seconds. Roar of Awakening and Ode to Deceit. With the removal of Metamorphosis, along with changes to Corruption Blast, the Song of Destruction duo was falling a little bit short. We're injecting some extra power to let it ramp up faster. Corruption stacks required for bonus damage, reducing 25 to 10. Bonus damage from corruption stacks increased from 100% to 300%. Stacks required for adrenaline reduced from 50 to 25. Adrenaline gain per cycle increased from zero point 0.5 to 1. Igneous Calquette, Calme, Calzil, Calmore no longer reduce the adrenaline costs of their related abilities, as those abilities now have their adjusted costs by default. Asylum Surgeon's Ring now has a 10% chance to reduce the adrenaline cost of abilities by 15%. Fleeting Boots. Piercing Shot reduces the cooldown of Snipe by an additional 1.2 seconds per hit. Basic attacks now also apply the cooldown reduction effect of Piercing Shot. Blightbound Bow, Crossbow now has a 25% chance to prevent any ranged ammunition from breaking, not limited to backcriminal bolts. Tinchampas now deal damage based on the ability used against the primary target to nearby enemies instead of duplicating abilities cast, one explosion per Champa thrown. Decimation. Locate now hits up to 5 enemies within 3 tiles of the primary target. Ammo. At the top end, ranged gameplay became increasingly intensive, with frequent ammunition swapping required for relatively small gains. This created high input demand for limited payoff and made the style harder to optimize. Our goal with these changes is to make specialized ammunition more reliable, easier to execute correctly, and faster to reach their intended payoff. The focus is on reducing friction while preserving depth. Splintering arrows. All abilities now puncture, storing 1% of the ability damage per stack. Maximum stacks reduced to 250. Stacks now last 30 seconds. Puncture now deals more damage up front rather than the primarily over time. These changes make stack building more consistent than the previous Dazing Shot variant, and places the ammo as a reasonable choice for long encounters where you can easily hit the stat cap. Deathspore arrows effect now triggers on hit rather than on critical strike. Requires 12 stacks to grant the free ability cast. No longer grants critical strike chance. Cooldown is no longer reduced on hit. Now has a fixed 30-second cooldown. This shifts this shifts Deathspore from a high variance crit This shifts Deathspore from a high variance crit dependent effect to a more predictable and controllable source, more in line with ranged identity. When arrows maximum stacks have been reduced to 10, stacks can no longer be consumed before reaching 10. Consuming at 10 stacks now grants plus 25% hit chance and plus 25% damage for 9 seconds. This ensures Wens have a clear build and burst window, making it harder to misuse, such as triggering a non-basic earlier than intended. Bic arrows. Maximum stacks reduced from 200 to 150. Poison damage increased from 2% to 3% per stack. This tightens the stacking window while increasing per stack value, making ramp up faster and more impactful. Base hit chance, commonly referred to as affinity, is a core component of the NPC's defense. Every creature has 4 base hit chance values that determine how accurate different combat styles are against them. For example, consider a melee-based creature that has a weakness to fire spells. When you use the creature's specific elemental weakness, in this case, fire spells, that would be the weakest. When you use the same combat style as the weakness, but not the exact element, in this case air, water, or earth, it would be weak. When you're using the same combat style as the creature, in this case melee would be the same. Strongest when you use the combat style that is weak against a creature, in this case ranged. Okay, what does this mean in practice? Take a hill giant as an example based on its stats. Using a level 22 magic weapon and targeting its elemental weakness, which would be air spells, would give you 90% base hit chance. Using a level 22 melee weapon instead would result in a 60% base hit chance. We've adjusted the default base hit chance of many creatures to improve hit chance throughout the early and mid game experience. The updated values are listed below. Weakest is going to be 90 and stay 90. Weak is going to be 60 or 65 right now, going to be 70. Same as 55, going to be 60. Strongest is 45, going to be 50. Bosses, however, use custom hit chance values to preserve their intended balance and unique mechanics. In some cases, these also been adjusted where appropriate. For example, Kriara players typically have limited access to accuracy boosting effects. At Amascoot, the Devourer players have access to a wide range of tools such as specialized ammunition, special attacks, and familiars that significantly increase accuracy. These contextual differences are taken into account when setting affinity values to ensure each encounter remains balanced and rewarding. All of the God Wars 1 dungeons defense levels went from 75 to 60, armor 65 to 60. Affinities increased to match the new default affinities listed in the above table. For being the first foray into sustained bossing, the God Wars bosses had a reasonably high defense and armor. We've lowered this to be around the gear level where you would be looking to go there for an upgrade to make the progression feel a little bit more reasonable, which was my whole issue with that thing. Hellwigger, all affinities are going from 40 to 60. Gregorovic is all affinities 40 to 60. Twin Furies, all affinities 40 to 60. Vindicta and Gorvik, all affinities 40 to 60. Second phase, defense is going to be 75, or lowered to 75 from 80. Armor is going to be lowered to 75 from 80 as well. Calphite Queen, the affinities are getting jacked up across the board, it looks like, except for the defense is getting lowered and the armor is getting lowered. Weakest affinity 60 to 90, weak affinity 60 to 70, same affinity 40 to 60, strongest affinity 45 to 50. The defense is going to be 70 to 60. Armor is going to be 70 to 60. Araxor. The defense is going to be 85, turned down to level 80. Armor is level 90 currently, going to be turned down to level 80. Weakest melee form, 55 range form, increase to 60 matches magic form. Weak 55 melee form, 55 ranged form, increase 60 matches magic form. Same 50 melee form, 45 ranged form, increased 45 magic matches magic form. Strongest 40 melee form, 50 ranged form, and 40 matches magic form. Araxor was a bit of an odd case whereby their affinities didn't necessarily match up and felt excessively worse to use any style but ranged against him. While this made sense around release, nowadays you're as likely to go to Araxor with any style to get your next upgrade, so we've relaxed those differences and reduced their defense to reduce how ineffective T80, T85 weapons are when you are looking for your upgrade. Araxi is weakest 55 to 60, weak 55 to 60, same 45 to 60. Araxi felt disproportionately worse to do with magic due to her lower same affinity. We've normalized each of these so that Araxi doesn't feel notably and surprisingly harder based on which style you choose to bring. Jad is all affinities 40 to 55. Jad holds a milestone place due to the value of the fire cape, and by extension, the Tokarkal capes from the fight kiln and the igneous cape from Kalzuk. But accuracy can feel a little unfriendly due to his low affinities. King Black Dragon. Affinities increase to match the new default affinities listed above in this table. Early to mid game players already suffer through needing to use the anti fire shield or a super anti fire potion if they're aware of it, so we've increased his affinities across the board to use the default affinities. Bugs, fixes, and changes. Fixed an issue where Masuta would randomly nullify incoming damage. Calphite King's immortality is now triggered by Bombard, Pulverize, and Tsunami instead of Unload Frenzy and Smoke Tendrils. Blackstone Dragon's Get Backhand achievement is now triggered by using Backhand. fixed an issue where flanking activated when walking underneath an NPC. The Quake ability overrides have been transferred to Meteor Strike. Visual effects can appear detached from Roar of Awakening when performing older animations. Animation, visual effects, and visual improvements. Alongside the gameplay updates, we are also improving the visual clarity of combat. Many combat visuals have remained largely unchanged since the evolution of combat in 2012. As a result, some animations, visual effects, and ability icons no longer meet modern expectations for readability or polish. Clear visuals are critical in a combat system, not just for aesthetics, but for communicating timing, impact, and feedback to the player. With this update, we are refreshing a number of ability animations, visual effects, and icons to improve the clarity and overall presentation. In addition, the majority of ability animations have been migrated to our new animation system. This allows them to blend cleanly into one another, resulting in smoother transitions and a more cohesive feel during combat. While not every ability has been updated in this release, improving the visual quality and readability of combat remains an ongoing priority for us. Melee, they cleaned up the animation for Hurricane and new visual effects. Flurry has a new visual effect, they cleaned it up. Barge, new Greater Barrage, Greater Barrage, new Greater Barge bleed animation with a new visual effect. Fury has a new animation, Dismember, Slaughter, Massacre, new animations, new visual effects, and new ability icon. Chaos Roar, new ability icon. Meteor Strike, new ability icon. Range, projectiles now have a new visual effects trail. Piercing Shot, new animation, new visual effects, new ability icon. Ricochet, new animation, new visual effects, new ability icons. Snipe, all the same thing, new animation, new visual effects, new ability icons. Snapshot, all the same thing. Rapid Fire, the same thing, except for no new ability icon. Deadshot is new animation, new visual effects, and new ability icon again. Swiftness is just new ability icon. Magic, new cast animation for the basic attack. Each of the base spellbooks has a new visual effect from strike to surge. Sonic Wave has a new visual effect and ability icon. Concentrated Blast, same thing. Impact, same thing. Chain, same thing. Combust has a new ability icon. Corruption Blast, new ability icon. Wild Magic, cleaned up animation and new visual effect. Affixie is new visual effect. Omnipower cleaned up and new visual effect. Detonate has been removed as a part of this update. Like Quake, we are removing its animation overrides to other abilities, but we haven't finalized a decision on this just yet. What's next? As we mentioned earlier, combat is one of the key parts of RuneScape, and it's something we'll continue to actively maintain. While this update is a major step forward, RuneScape is a living MMORPG with weekly updates, and that means we'll always be refining and improving the core systems alongside adding new content and refreshing old favorites. We're committed to continuing this work, making combat better for everyone, from brand new adventurers to the most seasoned veterans. The community has been hard at work over the past few weeks, diving into the beta, sharing feedback, and helping shape these changes into the best possible versions of themselves. One group in particular has been consistently at the forefront of PVM knowledge, creating resources and guides that help all players. Experience levels engage with combat and bossing. With this being such a large scale update to how combat works, the team over at PVME had been using the beta to put together early guides to help players get up to speed. They're also using this opportunity to rebuild their guides from the ground up with a renewed focus on making them useful for players of all skill levels. The main guides will no longer revolve around complex ability spreadsheets, instead, aiming to stay clear, simple, and informative. Advanced rotations will move into separate guides tailored for experienced players who want to push their performance even further. Check out their website for astounding guides and helpful tools. So, hopefully all that helped you guys. Something in here could possibly, get you hype, get you looking forward to the next update they got, or the road to restoration. I'm hyped for it. Like I said before earlier in the video, they're actually doing stuff now. So you know, it's all we could hope for. Hopefully they stay improving the game, and that would be great. But hopefully you enjoyed it once again. And as always, if you're not already subbed, I would greatly appreciate it if you drop a sub, a like. Any feedback is fine. As always, stay positive out there, guys.